Hey there, folks. Since book tour and conventions have been put on hold for a bit, I figured I would bring book tour to you. So welcome to Russ's Rockin' Rollercoasters, intriguing interviews with creative minds. With us tonight is the New York Times and USA Today best-selling mystery, crime, and suspense author, and a three-time Mary Higgins Clark Award nominee, Wendy Corsi Staub. Hello, Wendy.
Hi guys. Hi Russ. How you doing?
Good, good, good. So Wendy, just to sort of get us started, what part of the country are you in tonight?
I'm in the New York City suburbs.
All right, right on. Okay. So for the folks at home, feel free to send me notes or questions you have for Wendy in the chat box during the show, and we'll get to a few at the end. All right. So Wendy, let's get started a little bit about you. So where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Dunkirk, New York, south of Buffalo, snow belt of Western New York on the shores of Lake Erie. So that was my hometown. Everybody in my family pretty much is still there. A lot of my friends are still there. I think some of them are here tonight. And it was, very snowy, very cold, very warm family kind of place. And it's my second home, always will be.
So actually, I think we talked about this before. I lived in Buffalo myself for several years. I went to Buffalo State College.
Over Buffalo, yeah.
Yes, and I was an English teacher in my former life, and I did my student teaching at Lafayette High School, an experience I will never forget. And the wind and those massive snowstorms and that frost that comes off Lake Erie is one that'll really get you freaky. So I don't know if you know this. Maybe we talked about it. So for the folks who are listening, in Buffalo, right next to Buffalo State College, the campus, was the old psychiatric center.
Yeah.
It's this big old Gothic building, very creepy, very scary, and the campus was right next to it. So what we would do is we would cut through the psych center. There was a carve out, and we would walk through the psych center grounds, with the rolling mist and at night, so we can go boozing on the other side. They've since turned the psychiatric center into, of course, a funky hotel.
Yeah. Yes, it's a Marriott now.
Yes, it's our own Shining. So there you go.
Exactly. I was supposed to stay there a few months ago.
Oh, really? Did you get a chance to actually stay there?
Yeah, I couldn't get up there. It was February. I was going for a fundraiser. Okay. My sister and my friend were doing, but I couldn't make it. Too bad, because I really wanted to stay in the psych hospital. As a 4-star hotel.
Of course. So you grew up in Buffalo. It was cold. You had a warm family in a cold town with lots of snow.
That's about it.
Were you, you write dark and creepy books. Were you a dark and creepy kid?
Some might say I was. My parents were, because I was obsessed with Lizzie Borden. But no, I was really a kind of a, I didn't have a dysfunctional childhood. I had like a really supportive, loving family. I don't know why I went to the dark side. I was a brownie. I volunteered playing bingo with old people. I was in Key Club, those kinds of things. So some part of me always feared, I guess, the dark side and the bad things that can happen. And I think that's why I decided to write about them. It was a control freak thing. I thought if I write about it, it can happen.
Did you read, as a kid, as a teenager, did you read creepy books and watch creepy movies? Was that kind of your thing?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I have, and not just creepy. I mean, I started really young with Nancy Drew, where everybody starts, and then I moved on to the really creepy stuff. Creepy movies, scary movies. I couldn't stay in the room for the whole thing, but I really, I just ate that stuff up. I loved it. And my family really thought, what's up? What's up with this girl?
So how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have one sister, one brother.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm the oldest. Yeah.
So were they into like creepy stuff too?
Not
or was that
at all. No.
Really?
No, my sister reads everything. She's afraid to read these particular books. And my brother, I babysat for him. He's 7 years younger. So I was the one who said there's no such thing as creepy, scary things. And then, I'd have to call my parents when they were out and page them at the movie theater because I thought there was a psycho killer on the porch.
Oh, jeez.
Imagination.
Did you have actually one of those old, you know, wraparound porches in the front of your house?
Yeah, actually Victorian. Yeah, I grew up in
Yes.
a, I didn't think it was haunted. My sister thinks it was haunted. We have talked about that. I didn't think it was haunted. I just thought that it had, a lot of windows where people could be watching, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
what was, so of your, so you started with Nancy Drew. What did you move up to? Like, what was your,
Scooby-Doo. Josie and the Pussycats.
okay,
And
well,
then it went darker. So then I went to, Mary Higgins Clark was, I was in 6th grade and I read one of Mary's books, and it was just, I was hooked on mystery from there on. And then I went really into darker things. I loved true crime. So, In Cold Blood and anything about Lizzie Borden. Like, I have a bookshelf right next to my desk right now, and I have I have like 3 shelves of true crime that I loved. Just anything really dark and scary. I liked ghost books, anything about a ghost. I liked Rebecca, stuff like that. Anything kind of foreboding.
right, so you seem to be more on the, on the spooky than on, you were more spooky and less gory.
Not paranormal, definitely not gory. Psychological suspense is what I would say. Yeah. Yeah, the worst things that I write about usually happen off camera or off the page. Like the scary stuff. I don't like to be gory and graphic. I don't think you really need that if it's psychological suspense, because your mind will fill in. My mind will and your mind will.
So that's interesting, actually. So was that always so when you were reading books or watching scary movies or creepy TV shows, I mean, did you watch like Outer Limits and Alfred Hitchcock and that kind of thing, or Twilight Zone, or was that
Twilight
not?
Zone. Yeah, Twilight Zone, Alfred Hitchcock, a little bit. I like Charlie's Angels because I wanted to read one of them. So I
Who
like,
didn't?
well, I like the idea of a kick-ass woman, just
Totally.
being, like, and 3 of them were, with great hair because, I didn't look like them. so,
Well,
so
neither
I
did
love,
I, so fair enough.
yeah, moonlighting. I like stuff like that, like kind of like that sort of witty and fast-paced detective stuff, I guess, when I was growing up, more than the really dark stuff. But I love Twilight Zone because I really love a twist. I love a book with a twist. I love to be fooled, and Twilight Zone kind of took that and ran with it. I loved it.
Have you actually gone back and watched them now as an adult?
No, I saw, it's so funny, my son was in a play when he was in school, and now he's a college grad, so my younger son, they both are, but they acted out 3 scenes from Twilight Zone. That was their school play one year, and they were the ones you'd see, the guy on the plane with the person on the wing, and
Yeah.
it was really cool to see again because they did it verbatim. It's just it was so cool because I'd forgotten about.
I just watched that one with my daughter actually not that long ago. I actually thought they did a great remake of that in the movie with John Lithgow. That one segment was actually, I thought, really quite good. It was in the 80s actually. So you've got 2 kids. So where did you meet your husband?
I feel like I must have told you this if you're asking me, because it's funny. I met him at the company Christmas party when we were both working in advertising in December 12th, 1988, day that will live in infamy in this house. I was an office party don't. I got there early. I was with my friends. We were having fun. We were not being, the kinds of professional people we probably should have been. So he came over and introduced himself.
So did he know at the time that you were kind of a creepy, spooky kind of gal?
No. He asked me where I was from, and I said, "You never heard of it? Little town upstate New York." And he said, "Try me. Where?" And I said, "Near Buffalo. You never heard of it?" And he's like, "Where?" And I said, "Dunkirk, New York." He's like, "I've been there." He had a fraternity brother who had was from my town, and he had gone to some of the clubs in my town. Clubs. When I say clubs, I mean like, men drinking beer at the bar, brightly lit, those kinds of clubs. So he had been there to Dunkirk, and he had gone to college in Geneseo upstate. And he was like, "Oh, I thought I was done with those winters, but we go back every Christmas." So it was good. It was right from the start.
So how did he take to your creepy and dark side?
It wasn't as fully developed when I met him. I was working in advertising, and I was an aspiring writer. So I sold my first book about 6 months, I think, after we got married. And so that was when the dark side came in. Marriage, dark side, I guess. But that's when I started selling, and yeah.
Okay. So you're also in your private, you're a swimmer. So
Yeah.
when did that become like a passion for you? How did that happen?
10 years ago. I have a really bad spine. I mean, I always loved to swim. I always loved the water, but I have a really bad back. You and I were talking about, we both have bad backs. It's, my author back, all kinds of issues. So I was trying to avoid surgery, and they said, one more idea before we do the surgery, just try swimming, because if it helps, because I was saying, oh, it always feels a little better in the summer. So I started swimming every day. I usually go 5 a.m. for an hour, and I read books on an audio device while I swim, and it keeps me sane,
Right.
relatively so, and it keeps me upright, and I avoided surgery.
Wait, so, I mean, I don't know about the tech, because I didn't actually, I was a terrible swimmer, and I learned how to swim at the Y when I was in my 30s.
Wow.
There, you can safely put in audio buds in your ear
Yeah.
while you're in
Yeah.
the water?
Yes, I can. It's called it's underwater audio, makes this little device. It's a Waterfi, and it's a little, so you hook up to a little shuffle, like an iPod shuffle that they waterproof. And
Right.
I figured out, like, you could listen to music, but I never have enough time to read. So now I just
Right.
read books and swim. I'm reading on it right now. I love it. So anything that's on audio, it's like my two favorite things to do: read and swim. Got
So
one.
when you're swimming and you're in the zone and you're listening to a book, can you actually really listen to the whole book, or do you kind of like go through stretches where you kind of zone out and you're like, wait a second, I just missed 10 pages.
It's so funny. That happens. That happens. It didn't used to happen as much, but after 4 months not swimming with the lockdown, I started swimming again about 10 days ago. And I realized I kept losing, I was just so happy to be back in the water. And then I was
Yeah.
worried about distancing from the person in the next lane, and I kept missing things. So usually, I mean, I used to be really good at this. I'll get back to it.
All right, good. So we're speaking of passions. Let's talk about writing. When did you first really get serious about it?
Well, some might say third grade. I didn't publish then. On the wall behind me in my office, I guess you can't see it. It's in a frame, and if I do this, the whole well, let me see, maybe. Can you see that red frame right there in the middle of the top up there?
Yep.
That's my essay I wrote in third grade about Abraham Lincoln. It's framed because my third grade teacher told me I did a good job, and she was so complimentary, and I had never written anything before, that when I went home from school that day, I told my mom I wanted to be an author when I grew up. And my mom actually wrote that down in my baby book. I also have that in a closet that I will not try to open while we're on camera. But I framed that because it was a moment in my life that really was, it was a time when I felt like I could do something different and create, like I was good at something, I guess. It was interesting to look back on it now, and I keep it up there. I got in touch with her again later in life, and once I was an author, and she wanted to see it, and I found it. I found the essay, and so now it's there every day. It reminds me that, whatever you want to do, crazy as it may seem, you can do it.
For sure. So, okay. So you started
Third
writing
grade.
in third grade. So,
I tried to publish Abraham Lincoln in my baby book. I also found rejection letters from Ladies Home Journal, McCall's Magazine, those kinds of things. I had sent it out to get published. I thought it was so good. My mom said I was a good writer too, and I should try to get published. So I did. So then flash forward about 20 years later or whatever. And that's when I sold.
So did you work with or study with other writers to help your craft and style? Like how did you get from third grade Abraham Lincoln to really kind of starting to break through a little bit?
There was so much work, and there was college in there. I didn't want to go to college. I told my parents, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to go live in New York, and nobody teaches you how to do that.
Right.
And they disagreed. They were like, you can get your education first, and then you'll go and do what you want to do. So they forced me so wisely to go to college. And that's where I really learned how to, I took writing workshops. I learned the craft. I learned discipline. I went to SUNY Fredonia, State University of New York.
Yes,
Fredonia.
I know it.
So, yeah. And, I owe them so much. I'm still in touch with a lot of people there. And that's where I learned the craft. And then the day that I was done, I moved to New York.
Really?
Said, okay, I'm here. Let's do this. And, wound up like as a telemarketer for a while, wound up,
Okay.
working all kinds of crazy jobs.
So did any of the, so hold on. So you worked a telemarketer. So did any of your telemarketing experience translate into your books in some way? Did it help you at all?
No, not, I wouldn't say the telemarketing. I mean, no, I would love to have a clever and poignant answer for your boss, but it's something I try not to think about really. No, I'm kidding. It just, it didn't, I've never killed off a telemarketer in my book because I was one. Maybe that's.
Did you get any, there's a certain persistency in doing telemarketing. Was that kind of always part of you, or did
No,
it help at all, or nothing?
I was a terrible telemarketer. I didn't want to answer questions. I was terrible at it. I felt sorry for the people. I was like, I'll just hang up now. So yeah, no, I was not good at that. The persistence, though, maybe. I was not a persistent telemarketer, but I was persistent, sending things out, trying to get published. So that, yeah, it was not the telemarketing. It was me trying to get out of having to be a telemarketer.
So you were at one point, you were an editor with Silhouette Books.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Yeah.
How did you get into that, and what was that like for you?
When I was in college, my college roommate had a sister who had an old roommate who was in publishing in New York. And so she's like, you should call her. You should call her. You want to go to New York and get into publishing? So I did. I took a People Express flight for $29, which you're probably too young to remember, but to Midtown, to New York. And I ended up in Midtown, and I just dialed a payphone. I called her. She's my editor these days at William Morrow, Lucia Macro. I called her up and said, I want to get into publishing. And she was working at Silhouette at the time. She's like, oh God, come up, it's raining, and she gave me so much advice. And then a few years later, I ended up working there as an editor, thanks to her.
So what kind of an editor were you?
I acquired women's fiction, romance, and I edited it for a couple of years. I was also submitting at the time under a pseudonym to my colleagues. I was submitting the books that I had written, trying to get published.
Really? Okay.
They weren't very good. They will never be published. But one day my boss took me into her office, closed the door, and said, I think you're, she had one of my manuscripts. She's like, are you Hillary? That was my pen name. I said, yeah, how'd you know? She's like, you know what? You should be writing what you really love to write. This isn't going to be it, but someday you will get published. So yeah, she came to my first book signing. She was in Canada by that time. She came, she drove hours to be there, and I still see her.
So you wrote all this, you wrote some romance stuff that really wasn't your thing.
No, I always wanted to write dark stuff. I wanted to write.
So besides kind of learning what you didn't want to do, which drove you to what you did want to do in terms of, but just the repetition of the writing and just doing it over and over, did you find that you were honing your craft along the way? Were you kind of getting closer to the kind of writer you wanted to be?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was learning to take criticism. Constructive criticism was great. And because I was working in the business, I was able to detach myself, I think, from the criticism that would feel so harsh if you were,
yes,
if it was part of you, if you felt like it was something that people were criticizing you about. I think that really helped.
So you made the transition, you started going, you said, all right, you know what? I know what I'm not. I'm just going to stop pretending to be this thing that I know I'm not. I'm going to dive into the psychological side of things. So, and we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I want to dive in a little bit more. So you like the psychological suspense, the terrible things that kind of happen a little bit in the distance that kind of mess with your mind. Yeah. So what is it for you is it more that you prefer it as a writer? Do you write that way because you prefer it as a reader? Or was it just sort of instinctive, or was it a plan that way? How did you kind of come to that style?
No, I think it was both. I think the thing that really pushed me into writing actual suspense, adult suspense, it was around the time my son was born, my older son. And I realized, I'm a mom, I'm a happy, wonderful person, and I would kill for this kid. I would take down anyone who came near him. And I think realizing that the stakes were that high for me, it was kind of like that ordinary person, like how far would you go? If you're an ordinary person, you find yourself in extraordinary circumstances, what would you do? That was the thing. That's what I write about. You know, I write about people who are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're regular people. And that's, to me, there's nothing scarier than that. You know, I'm not a cop. I'm not, you know, I'm not a superhero. I'm not a spy. I don't expect to find myself on a daily basis in a life or death situation. So I write about people who are like me, doing what they should do. And something threatens everything that matters to them.
Right. So you sort of toying with the, you know, what would scare me the most if I was posed with it?
Yeah, this world is a precarious place, and I don't think I really grasped that. For all my childhood fears and insecurities, I didn't grasp that until somebody else was in it, and it was my job to protect him and his brother.
So I don't know if you write this way. I know it's for me. When I get into a character or characters, I need to get into their headspace. I need to get into their emotional space to sort of tap into what they're going through. Is that how you write?
Oh yeah, and I write from multiple viewpoints, so I have to get into the villain's headspace. And the only way I really feel like I can do that is to find the good thing about them. You know, I mean, and I also have to find the flawed piece of the hero, because nobody, or heroine, nobody's all good and nobody's all bad. So to go to that dark place and live in somebody's head and they're a bad person, I try to find something human about them so that I can relate to them and dwell in that, right? Because it messes with you after months of.
So that's what I wanted to ask you about. So you get into this headspace, into this, not just the headspace, but that emotional space, and it really starts to, it can affect you.
Yeah.
You find that it's hard for you sometimes when you're done, you've gotten into that space. It's dark, it's creepy, it's disturbing, it's scary, that sort of actors talk about this sometimes, where they can't get out of character. Do you find that you need like a cooling off period, a letting go period, to sort of let that ickiness go so that you can come back and just kind of be you?
Yeah, I cook. That's funny, because I always say, like, we don't get a commute, right? We work from home, and these days no one's getting a commute, so they can maybe relate. But that was always my thing. You know, at night, I need to be in my own head for a little while, and I'm coming. And I don't mean to be so dramatic, like it's so, you know, but it is rough. Like, you are dwelling there. And during the day, because my husband works from home a lot of the time too, and if I go into the kitchen and he talks to me, sometimes I snap at him. It's because I'm in that place.
Right.
And at the end of the day, you know, I cook dinner. You know, I love to cook, but it's also my commute. You know, that's how I sort of come down.
Right.
Like food, I pour wine. I try to have some normalcy, and we eat dinner, and we like to watch TV. You know, that kind of thing. Because you can't dwell in your own head. That's why I don't really like to when I'm swimming. I like to have somebody else's words in my head.
Right.
I don't want to obsess over it.
Well, good. Well, you know what? Good food and good wine sounds like an excellent recipe. So just a quick interlude for folks who came in a little late. If you have any questions or comments for Wendy, send them in the chat box, and we'll get to a few at the end of the show. Okay, Wendy, you've got a new book, The Butcher's Daughter. It's the third entry in your Foundling series. So talk to me about The Butcher's Daughter and your investigative genealogist, Amelia Crenshaw.
Okay, so The Butcher's Daughter is the third in a trilogy. They kind of stand alone, but this is wrapping up her story. She is a foundling, which means she was left on a doorstep, basically. A foundling, I found out that my own great-grandfather was a foundling.
Is that right?
Yeah. And I hadn't known that while my mom was alive. It was her grandfather. He died long before I was even born. But one of my aunts told me that afterward. He had bright red hair and blue eyes, and he didn't look like anyone else. You know, he was left at the doorstep. And I found out when I started to do some research that this town in Sicily had a lot of foundlings. They had so many foundlings, they had a rotisserie type of a wheel in the walls of the church where couples would come to leave a baby and spin it around and pull the bell cord to let the nuns know that there was another, you know, child that they were leaving. So that was a town that he came from, Belladolmo, Italy. And he was a foundling. So when I found that out, I was like, oh my God, he went on to have 13 children and raise an amazing family. I have cousins everywhere. And he never knew who he was. And I kind of wanted to find out who he was. So I set out to do that with Ancestry and DNA. Right. And along the way, you know, I still haven't found out who he was. I have some clues. Not when I say who he was, he knew who he was.
Right.
But who were his, who were his biological relatives and why was he
Right.
left. But that's when I started to conjure this character, Amelia, and I was like, that opens up all kinds of great plot lines. And yeah, so I wrote 3 books about her.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about this last one. So what do you want? I know you don't want to spill the beans, but what do you want folks to know about it?
Sure. These are my last few ARCs that I have, but yours
There you go.
It's yeah. So this one goes back and forth in time from the 60s. And it's the civil rights movement and a lot of historical stuff that I found really fascinating to research, very timely, to now. And it's Amelia finds out who she is. She's got a DNA test result, but also it's this is really close to my heart. It was kind of Detective Stockton Barnes, who I wrote as a one-off character years ago. He popped up. He's in all 3 of these books, and he has a daughter that he had that is missing, and so she plays a role in this, and he's a strong role in this too. So yeah, they were characters I've been writing for years. It's hard to give it up. This is the last one.
So let me ask you, so if folks are going to jump into this one, could they read this one as a standalone, or do they need to read the first 2?
You could, but it's not out until August 25th, so you have time to read the first 2, Little Girl Lost.
Now that's classic marketing right there. I love it.
Advertising when I met my husband.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
So there's 2 others.
Good. Well, that sounds great, and I can't wait to get a copy myself. All right, so now it's time for a special segment of the show where are you ready?
Which one?
We're going to spin the wheel.
Oh, no.
All right. So this is a special segment where there are 7 categories that on the wheel. All right, and they are 2 lies and a truth, stranger danger, space meal, music lover, stranger in a strange land, spend that money, and fear of flying. So we're going to spin the wheel, and whatever you get, that's what you play. You ready?
Yeah.
All right, you ready? All right, and you got music lover. Okay. So what is one song or piece of music that you love no matter how many times you hear it, you still love it?
It's so easy. All right, I'm a U2 groupie. I've followed them around. I've been to lots of concerts. So anything by U2, love you, Bono, if you're watching.
You got to pick one.
Yeah, I would say City of Blinding Lights.
City of Blinding
Lights, because New York is my city. I moved there when I was a kid. When I say a kid, I was 22. And I miss it so much right now. And whenever I hear that song, I know it wasn't about New York, but that's my New York song. That's my place.
Well, I'm a fellow U2 fanatic myself. So yes, I am. My wife and I
at the same concert at the Meadowlands, right?
Yes, we actually saw the Joshua Tree.
Yeah, Joshua Tree there.
Yes.
There was another author there, my friend Allison Galen. Read her stuff.
There you go.
We were there.
I was indeed there. It was fantastic. All right, Wendy. So you and I are both in the writing business. So let's go to our advice column. What's the best and the worst writing advice someone ever gave you, or advice that you overheard someone else give?
Oh, the best is easy because I re-quote her all the time. It was in my early romance editor days, I got to read a lot of and edit a little bit of Nora Roberts back in the day before she was as huge as she is. And she once said, ass in the chair was her advice. Like someone would ask her, like, how do I do this? How do I write a book? It's so simple. Sit down, put your butt in that chair and write the book. There's no other way. Like you can talk about it all day long and talk about your ideas and your process, but unless you sit down and write words, and it really resonated with me, and I give her credit and I abide by that.
All right. What about the worst?
The worst? God, I think it's write what you know, because in a way you need to write what you know, right? But I don't know about people who lived in the 60s in the Deep South. I just wrote an entire trilogy about them. I think you have to reach and read and research. And to me, like if I just wrote what I knew, it would be this room, there's a cat on that bed, I make it, I have fried chicken in the oven that I made, and wine and flowers. Like that's kind of my life, and it's not that interesting. So reach. How about you?
The worst advice. Interesting. You know, it's funny. I'm always asking the questions. No one's ever asking me. Best advice I ever got. It's similar. It's sit down and do the work. You know, we all have a million excuses and a million reasons for why we don't have words. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I've got other responsibilities. Well, so does everyone. Either you're going to sit down and
Yeah,
clack the key.
exactly.
Either you're going to clack the keys or you're not. It's not right or wrong or good or bad if you do it. But if you want to do it, then do it. And if it's
Right.
not important enough to you to clack the keys, then you won't.
Right.
The worst advice. I'll share this story.
I can't wait.
I've told this story before. I need a prop, so bear with me. This is a prop
Okay.
story. Hang on.
I hope I didn't give you this advice.
No, you didn't. Hang on one second.
Good. Okay. Oh, I'm so curious.
So
It's not front and center, so clearly.
there you go. So 25 years ago when I was starting out, I was a journalist. I was a healthcare journalist, and I had written something, and I had a corner desk, you know, in a nook. So there was like a little corner there, and I was sitting down and I was clacking. I was on deadline, as we were constantly, and I was writing. And I had this editor, and she was short, only 5 feet tall, and I won't mention her name. She walks up to my seat because my head is down and I'm really focused and I'm deadline, and I feel the presence of someone come up, and I look up, and she's right up against the desk. She's like this close to me, hovering over me. And I'm like, huh. And she was a very kind of scary woman to begin with. And she's holding up a sheet of paper like this. And she says, "Did you write this?" Now, meanwhile, I can only see the back of the paper. I don't know what's actually on it. And I said, I don't know. She throws it in my face and she says, "It makes me sick. Do it again."
Wow.
So I said, "Okay, well, thanks for the feedback. That was helpful." and I went back and I wrote it again. So
Did you write it?
I did.
I want it to be that you didn't even write it.
I don't even know. I don't remember what it was. I just know.
Oh my God, that's so awful.
Yes. So I was a young reporter, and at that point, after that moment, no piece of criticism about anything I've ever written has really fazed me that much. Because if I can live through that, I can live through anything.
Oh yeah, I think we've all been raked over the coals, and I think thick skin. Like when I was a little girl, I was like so intimidated by it, and now I'm just kind of like, bring it. I can deal with it.
Fair enough. All right, so we got a couple of minutes, so we're going to take some questions from the audience. We got a couple that's come in. Hello, Wendy. I love every single one of your books that I've ever read. Have you ever thought of doing any sequels to some of your earlier books, such as Dearly Beloved?
Oh, that's one that's wow. That was my first adult suspense novel. That's probably one of the few that I haven't thought about doing a sequel for, and I need to reread that. I wrote it in 1993, I think. I will revisit that and I will let you know. Thank you.
All right. And then another one for you is, who is your favorite author?
Oh God, I never name names because so many of my favorite authors are actually literally my friends like these days. So yeah, I don't name names. I can tell you, I like anybody pretty much who writes suspense. And I'll tell you a great book I recently read. No, I will not, because I realized, nope.
Okay.
Never mind.
All right, fair enough. Okay, well, we did our best. Okay, so we talked about The Butcher's Daughter, and we know there's not going to be any more in the series, but there's 3 of them. So where can folks get The Butcher's Daughter and the first 2 in the series?
The Butcher's Daughter is coming out August 25th. You can pre-order it now. There are links on my website or anywhere, any bookseller can get it for you. And if real life bookstores are open, and stores where you buy your food or your whatever, it should be there in a few weeks.
Okay.
But you can find the links on my www.wendycorsistaub.com. Good.
Okay.
There are my links.
All right. Thanks. We got one last question for you, and then we'll wrap it up. The question for you is, what book made a significant impact in your life?
Oh God, Little Women. When I was a kid, Little Women is one that just rolled off my tongue because it was, I loved it, and now it's a movie that really spoke to me. But she was a writer, and she was someone who, you know, Joe was a writer and Louisa May Alcott was a writer that I could relate to 100 years later. So yeah, that book resonates. I read it every Christmas and I have a leather bound copy right there that you can't see that my mom gave me for Christmas. So.
All right, right on. Thanks, Wendy. This was a great show, and thank you everyone who signed up to watch. I'm your host, Russ Colchamiro, and if you're looking for more mystery and suspense, check out my own noir anthology collection, Murder in Montague Falls, 3 tales of crime, seduction, and of, you guessed it, murder, with one novella each from my writing partners, Sawney Hatton, Patrick Thomas, and yours truly. On sale now through Amazon and published by Crazy 8 Press. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys next week.